That way they're getting a really realistic number up front, right? And so I think it's important to do that, whether you're doing, just one room furnishing or a renovation project. It's trying to get them at close to that number to really be thoughtful, because in terms of, as a designer, your time is you want to be smart with your time, right? You don't want to design this entire house and then the client be like, we can't afford that. It was a big waste of time. You might have underestimated the amount of your design fee time, right? And so those are things that we do up front to avoid all of that headache.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 25 of the Design Dialogues podcast, the first for 2024. I hope you have all had a relaxing and reviving break over the holiday season. I have so many wonderful dialogues planned for 2024, and I know you are going to enjoy them and get so much out of them for your design business. And to kick us off, I have my chat with Manon Roux from Atelier Roux. As you'll quickly hear from Manon's voice, Manon is a New York-based interior designer. I had this chat with Manon a few months ago, and it was so interesting to hear some of the similarities and some of the differences between our experiences as Australian and US-based designers. I got so much out of this chat, and one of the things in particular was where Manon talked about how they present their fee proposals to their clients over Zoom. It was a really interesting perspective from Manon in an area of business that I think a lot of designers struggles with. She talks about how the reality is that even though we are designers, at that point in the process, we are really salespeople, and that we need to close the sale just like any other salesperson would. I thought that was such an insightful way of looking at it, at a part of the process as well that can be really challenging for designers. The reality is, though, that it is such a crucial stage in our business to ensure that we have a strong workflow. Being able to convert those inquiries into clients is crucial. I hope you enjoy this first design dialogue for 2024 with Manon Roux. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. And this week I am joined by Manon Roux from Atelier Roux. Hi, Manon, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. And you will automatically hear that it's an American accent that we're listening to today. So I always love to hear, what can you see out your window today?
Well, right now it's dark, so we're about 8 p.m. here. So can't see much, but we finally have a really nice breeze here. So kind of getting out of the heat is really nice.
Yeah, because you're in the kind of the peak of your summer, aren't you?
Yeah. But it's been a pretty mild summer, surprisingly. So it's good.
Oh, nice. So tell me a little bit about your business. So you're a designer in New York. But tell me about how you started your business journey. You have small children, so we have a shared experience in that. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your interior design business.
So my path, I think, like some designers, is not the straight path. I actually started, my parents are artists. I studied a number of things when I was younger. I studied photography and graphic design in college, and I had sort of dabbled in interior design at RISD, which is Rhode Island School of Design, when I was, sort of in pre-college phase. So I always had, a love of design. And I think life kind of takes you on lots of different turns. So I actually, graduated from college and was in sort of advertising and production. I started a tech business with my husband, which was a whole other feat. But during the time that I was doing that, alongside it, we bought our first property. We spent about 10 years looking in New York for really that dream project where we could have a lot of hands-on and design it ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we literally bought a pile of rubble in Brooklyn. And there was really nothing here, which was a great opportunity. We had a floor plan with an architect and got to come into the project and build everything from scratch. I think that was sort of, an enlightening part to the journey of design, because I know that it's, sort of really a stressful process. A renovation or designing a home from scratch is really a lot of work. And I don't think that we had any idea what we were getting into. But it was really sort of the catalyst for, part of why I started Atelier Roux was like, this desire to help clients get over the daunting design aspect of building a home or renovating a home or trying to even furnish a home. And so, we've been in business for 2 years, and we're growing, and we've been really busy, and we work with clients who are really looking for a turnkey home design experience that's super transparent and helps them be really thoughtful about how they spend and invest their money into their home, right? For right now and in the long term.
Yeah, awesome. And so that experience of, I suppose, being your own client, how has that shaped how you deal with clients? How do you, does it impact how you take them on that journey? Because it is especially like a complete home renovation. I think that is it is such a mammoth undertaking. And if it is the client's first experience of doing it, it can be a real emotional roller coaster. There's the excitement of we're going to do something, and then it dawns on them, wow, this is like an ultra marathon. It's not a sprint. So how is that experience of being your own client shaped how you kind of interact with your current clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that firsthand insight and experience myself into the design challenges and the number of decisions that come with designing a home that, I put that up front to our clients. Like, we're your partner, we've been there. And it's having that empathy with your client to help them deal with the stress of a home renovation or designing a home from scratch. So there's a lot of education in our client experience process from the very beginning, and helping them understand the ebbs and flows, right? We even have a diagram where we show, like, here's the beginning, where it's like, there's the high of the project and you're excited, you've signed on, and, we're going to show you this concept and you're like, oh, I love this. And then there's sort of like this waiting period for you to get through the design process, and then picking all the stuff. And then you go through construction, which is just like a zigzag up and down of highs and lows, in my opinion. So we really try to set those expectations in the beginning of our, journey with clients, even when we're presenting our proposal, help them understand, like, look, there's going to be a lot of things that happen along the way that we can't anticipate, right? But we want to set expectations and know that we're your partner every step of the way. So there's education through all those different phases, and we make sure that we provide our clients with, regular check-in and awareness of, like, what this stage means, right? Like, what is the concept schematics stage? What is the detailed design stage? What does construction look like? And how are we involved in this, and making sure everything that we design gets executed correctly, right? So that's a big part of what we try to do, is really balance that stress element and the education to make sure that they know we're with them along the way.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an important thing. Like, I think helping clients to understand exactly what's involved in the process. I think that always helps them know what they're up for, what they're signing up for. And also sometimes they're kind of like, no, it's not for me. And that's kind of a good decision for them to make at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And we do something a little bit different in that we do an exploratory phase sometimes for clients where they just don't know what things cost, right? Like a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know what things cost. And people get shocked. They get sticker shock where they're like, a living room costs $35,000. I mean, well, yeah, let's just add it up right
Yeah.
here and you'll see like, so we do a lot of upfront costs, pricing out so that people can really get a good sense of like, oh my God, this is what it's going to cost, right?
Yeah.
And it saves us, our energy from not going down this like rabbit hole of designing this whole thing. And then, the contractor says it's going to be $500,000 and they're like, no, 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 we can't do that. So we really do try to do a little bit different in that we do exploratory very early on and price out things when clients just don't really know and they want to be a little bit more thoughtful about their budget, and it helps us clear on scope.
So I'd love to know how, so I remember a boss that I used to work for, he would always be like, you got to get a budget out of them. But like before we even start, you got to get a budget out of them. And you'd be like, but they're just going to say, oh, I'm not sure. I don't have a budget. I'm just, and he's like, no, everyone has a budget. Yeah. And I think it's so true. Like everyone does have a budget, even if the budget is millions of dollars, there is a budget. How do you navigate that with a client, like getting down to where they feel comfortable with spending and what they've got to spend? And like, is it through that exploratory work? Like, do you kind of just keep kind of pushing and pushing until you get kind of a clear idea of what their budget is? Or do you kind of do it a bit more organically and kind of be guided by what they say, but kind of work it out as you go?
No, I for me personally, it's work that I try to get the number as early on in the project. And the reason why is that I've just seen it and where we're like, okay, well, they give us this threshold or whatever, and it's kind of, but then when you actually get to brass tacks and you're like, okay, it's going to cost you this, and they're like, wait, but we didn't, that's not what we meant. So we do sort of this really early, like I said, exploratory, what's like budget on the fly, where we'll say, okay, if we're designing a living room or a full house, we sit down with a client, we're like line by line, or say, how comfortable are you? What's your comfort zone in terms of what you would pay for a sofa? Yeah. And you don't want to pigeonhole them and say like, do you want to spend 5,000? Do you want to spend 10,000? You just want to see like, what is their reaction? They're like, well, I think 6,000 is reasonable for a sofa, yeah, why not? And then that's how we kind of build out the list. So we'll just tentatively say, and then you see, even in that, let's say it takes you 30 minutes to do that, the client, you've built out your spreadsheet already ahead of this meeting, and you tally it, and it's, here you go, it's $35,000 or it's $40,000 or whatever, maybe it's less than that because you're filling in with some of their existing pieces, but that way they're getting a really realistic number up front, right? And so I think it's important to do that, whether you're doing, just one room furnishing or a renovation project. It's trying to get them at close to that number to really be thoughtful. Because in terms of, as a designer, your time is you want to be smart with your time, right? You don't want to design this entire house and then the client be like, we can't afford that. It was a big waste of time. You might have underestimated the amount of your design fee time, right? And so those are things that we do up front to avoid all of that headache. Yeah. No, definitely. I think having a really clear idea of their budget before you've even started is such a crucial thing. And I think quite often it's where a lot of designers can come and unstuck. So so how do you balance, you mentioned you started a tech company with your husband, you've got kind of a bit of a windy road into design. How do you balance that creative side of the business with the business side of the business? How do you manage that from a day-to-day perspective, and then I suppose also from a big picture perspective? Yeah, I mean, I think, they always say like it's 20% creativity and 80% business or
Yeah.
and so I think it's very much that. But in terms of projects, you know, I think my years in tech and being very structured and doing product management and all that kind of stuff, I get very clear with clients in the very beginning in terms of like defining the parameters and the aesthetic goals of projects. And so, you know, it's really choices between sort of creative expression and practicality. Like you can have so many ideas in terms of like being creative and thinking outside the box, but at the end of the day, like it's a room and there's certain, constraints that you have to factor in. So we take a lot of that into consideration when we're designing with clients, is to like kind of rear that in and be thoughtful about like, okay, we want to be creative and we want to problem solve, but we have to really think about the parameters in the beginning that define the project.
Mm.
And so we continuously, we remain flexible in terms, and we have to adapt because there's always things that come up in projects, but I think it's always having that kind of top of mind, from a project standpoint. And in terms of running day to day, we do a lot of time blocking to really figure out how to deal with, the creative work, and then the days that we focus more on the administrative and the marketing and the business aspects, so that we're not constantly switching gears throughout the day. I think it's very hard to do that. So we have really specific days for that.
Yeah. And how big is your team?
So we're about 3 people
Yeah.
and it's growing. So
Yeah. And do
we're
you
about,
kind of use like, do you contract out certain parts of work, or do you try and keep it as much as in-house as possible?
yeah, so it's all contracted. We have some interns that work with us. So a couple of architecture interns and students, which is great. And they're, closer to graduating. So they have quite a bit of, experience from school,
Yeah.
really for all of our CAD programming and design aspects. So we're bringing on an additional person actually this fall, which is really exciting. And then we're about to bring on a VA, a virtual assistant, to help us with project management and procurement. I
Yeah.
find those two things that end up taking so much time away from the creativity and being hands-on with clients. So trying to alleviate that part is really exciting for me because it's not my favorite part.
And with that, how do you manage your kind of project load and workflow? Do you, some designers I talk to, they're like, no, if a project comes in and we love it, then we're going to make it work. We'll kind of bring in extra contractors, or where others designers are a bit more, they kind of take advantage of having like a waitlist system. And so they have a bit more controlled over their workflow in the studio. How do you manage that? Like, do you like to only have maybe 1 or 2 projects in concept stage and then, maybe another project in documentation? Or do you just kind of go, it's just how it goes? Like, it's whatever we're doing at the time.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a process. We definitely factor in timeline and understanding like where we are in certain projects, right? So if we're in schematics or the detailed design phase, which is super time consuming from everybody's standpoint, we factor that in, and if we have a project come on board, we're going to say, okay, we can't take you on until this date because we just don't have the bandwidth, right? We have to focus on those clients that we're already working with. I think it's important for us to make sure that we're really delivering on our client experience and what we promise people. So we're a little bit more thoughtful for all of our full service projects in terms of that workload, and we do have a wait list. And we have another service, which is our virtual design, which I call the refresh.
Yeah.
And that's a 2 to 3 week turnaround. I've really systemized that, and I know how many hours it takes, and we don't exceed it. And so those kinds of projects, we do have a wait list as well, but we're able to kind of insert those here and there depending on where we are with our full service projects. So, we're able to take on like maybe 1 or 2 a month, and we outsource that to a junior designer to, kind of oversee the execution.
Yeah, awesome. So I would love to talk to you a little bit about the wait list, because some of, like, when I talk to designers who don't use a wait list, they're like, oh, no, like they'll just go and find someone else. How do you are you upfront with the, like, if you get a new inquiry and you know that you're already at a point where anyone would need to go on a wait list, do you kind of have that conversation up front with the people before you've even really progressed? Or is it more that you, like, they are ready to, like, pay a deposit and they're ready to go, and then it's like, is it later on in the conversation that it comes up?
We let them know up front that we have a wait. And typically I find anyway, we don't rush our meetings. So like if we're doing a full service and somebody approaches us, we'll say, okay, we're going to book a consultation. We have an opening in, 2-3 weeks, because
Yeah,
we really just don't have the bandwidth to be running to multiple consultations all the time.
yeah,
And so by the time we kind of like get to that phase, and then we put together the proposal. We present our proposal through video call, like
yeah,
Zoom, to our clients, walk them through the experience, like I mentioned to you, walk them through the contract so that there's no surprises. And typically, we remind them, like, we're setting our schedule to start this project at this date. And so I find clients who really like your work are going to stick around and they're going to wait. I mean, I don't think you should ever rush a design project just for the sake of like rushing. Like you said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's
yeah,
this long process. And whether you start, I even tell with clients, they're like, well, I want my sofa right now. I'm like, well, you could either get a crappy sofa immediately, or you could wait, like
yeah,
a little bit of your life
yeah.
sofa. And so it's like that same thing is like, you can't rush great things. And I think that if you help clients understand that,
Yeah,
if that's what you want to do, right? Like they will stick around because they want to work with you, and that you're going to deliver, that they're going to get a great experience with you, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so something that you just said that I'd also love to go into, because I think this is another thing that I hear a lot of designers talk about. So you present your proposal in person or in over video. How did you come to that realization that that was a really important thing to do?
When clients weren't getting back to me,
Yeah,
or leads weren't getting back to us. And I think that we're in the business of sales, right? Like there's an element of you have to close the sale, just like when you get a sales call, they're like, well, would you like to book or pay for this now? It's the same thing, is that you don't want to wait for the answer. You want to know, like, whether this person wants to commit or not. There has to be a nice way to do that. And I think that when you show them in person and walk them through and help them understand, like, why is your design fee this? Like if you're getting a design fee that's $60,000 or whatever, and people are like, oh my God, but they don't realize you're spending, let's
yeah,
say, 8 months with them through this entire journey, and this is how everything is going to happen. And then you realize, wow, this person's actually committing a lot of time to my project and
yeah.
executing this. And so I think it's important, going back to the education aspect, to do that as a way to really make that trust factor come in, right? And for
Mm.
them to trust you. You're not just running away with their money. And so we started doing that, and I just find that it really does instill trust, and
Mm.
clients feel like you're more accessible and that they can ask you all the questions that they have right then and there and understand it better.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think I know it's definitely, there's a couple of designers here in Australia that talk about this, and how it's about explaining the process to the client in a way. And it's almost like you've taken them on such a journey already before you get to this presentation of the fee proposal, that they're kind of going to have an idea, like the number shouldn't be a shock, because
Yeah.
they should be aware of how much work's going into it, because you've fully explained the process.
Yeah.
Um, do you have pushback from clients on it? Like they're like, no, we don't need that, like just send it across.
I do, but I tell them this is how we run our business.
Yeah.
And if they're not on board for that, then I don't think that they're the right kind of client, right? You're buying into our brand and the way we do things. And I think that again, it's setting expectations. And I want them to feel like we are a partner and we're communicating with you every step of the way and helping you understand, again, why we do what we do, and that we're educating you as we go along. So it's, they give you a little bit of pushback, but I'm just saying, trust me, we have lots of questions, and this is a great way for us to go through everything.
Yeah. And I suppose that comes down to as well, like, it's as much as the client is kind of interviewing you and working out if they want to work with you, it's also about you working out if that you want to work with them. Because if they're pushing back on something like this, then it's like, oh God, what else are they going to push back on, and how painful are they going to be? And yeah, it's a pretty big red flag.
Yes.
What are there other things in your business that you've done or you've implemented into your process like this, where you've kind of gone, okay, this isn't working, we're going to change how we do it? Like, are there other kind of key things that you've done that you think make a big difference to your process?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think the leads process and getting that really honed in is super important, right? It's your lifeline as a business. And so, losing clients, potential clients through that process, if you have a leaky funnel, there's a problem. You got to fix that. So that's sort of been one of our biggest focus this year, is to make sure that we're converting people that way. I think things adapt, right? Like, it depends how far you are in your business. How many years of it have you been doing this? There's always things that come up. We've introduced more of this exploratory phase element that I talked to you about, because I have found where, we pitch a project and the client's like, we want to renovate this bathroom and we want to do this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And, I think it's going to take X amount of hours to do this. And then we end up actually like undercharging. And I think that getting very clear on budget and what the scope of work is really important very, very early on in the project, so that you know what you're setting yourself up for. We've even done things where we've designed a bathroom and then the contractor finally comes in and gives us a price and the client's like, I don't want to pay for that. Actually, we need to revise it. We don't want it to be a bathroom anymore. We just want it to be a powder room. I'm like, well, my revision time to redo drawings is not included in this package. So, we have to kind of backtrack, and we wasted all this time picking all this tile and, hardware and plumbing. And so it's things like that where we did kind of institute this new system really early on for anything that has to do with renovation. So where clients are kind of iffy and they don't know how much things are going to cost, we just kind of say, let's get one contractor to kind of bid the project with a quick scope and, general concept. And then people are like, oh no, we can't spend that. And I'm like, great, because we didn't waste time designing all this thing that you were never going to execute on.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Because I think bringing in, like, I know in my process, so I have a couple of builders that I can call on, that I kind of go, come through with me. Let's do a bit of a walkthrough. We'll have a chat about what the client wants to get done. And can you kind of give us a bit of an idea, using kind of, middle of the road finishes, where we're going to sit? And I've found it's a really great way of it, either like, it just kind of, it's a bit of a reality check for the client. So they can either go, oh, great, I can get it all in. I'm serious now. Let's get going. Or it's like, we've got to double the budget to get what you want done. And I just think it really helps the whole process go more smoothly, because there's nothing worse than you do spend all of this time on concept design and you develop the design and it's beautiful and the client's fallen in love with it. And then you give it to the builders and they're like, double the budget or 3 times the budget. And then you've got this awful situation where, like, the client's just never going to be happy now, because they're always feeling like they're missing out, because they fell in love with your beautiful concept in the beginning. So I think that's something where a lot of designers, if they can, so much of it comes down to building good relationships in the start. But if you have a builder that you can bring in to kind of get that feedback really early on in the process, I think makes it such a better process for everyone.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. And I think I always say, build out like your template spreadsheet, that's sort of like your boilerplate for any kind of thing. And that, sort of what standard, medium, and luxury
Yeah.
things cost. So whether it's a piece of appliance or a tile or something, having that up there front and center for you to just work off of, and you can kind of delete as you need to for that
Yeah.
project, just saves you so much time and energy.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Oh gosh, yes, so many great points there around process, and I think it's something designers can really work with.
Yeah.
So you're obviously in America, so your industry similar but different to over here. What are some of the challenges you see for the interior design industry?
I think right now the biggest thing that's so wild to me is all the AI stuff that's
Yeah,
going on. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know how it is where you are, but I'm seeing like Pinterest and Instagram is just
yeah,
like nothing but AI, and it's just exploded in the
yeah,
last, I would say, 4 months,
yeah,
literally. And I think there is sort of this struggle anyway, I think, in the world of Instagram where everybody wants everything to be picture perfect. And
yeah,
I think there's a lot of, people aren't clear on the reality of like what's real, what's achievable, and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like a lot of people would be like, well, I could just ask, AI to design my room, which is
yeah,
fine, but AI isn't going to factor in like all of the things in your space, right? Like, unless you can tell it my window size is this and that, and my budget is this, like, it's never going to be able in the real world to build exactly that. So
yeah,
I think it's beautiful for the imagination.
yeah,
But I think that, it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens. It's like, do people start thinking like, oh, interior design is dead because of this? And I just don't think that's the case. I think it's a really interesting tool that gives you imagination and
yeah.
creative, new ideas. But I think some people are a little scared, but I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
it is a
interesting.
challenge in that sense, for
Yeah,
sure. And I think, like I said, client expectations and trends and things like that. Everybody thinks that, you have a pretty space like in the blink of an eye. And
yeah,
I think that's a large, it's sad because I think a lot of designers don't actually help people understand that, right? Sometimes people are like, well, do you have more work in your portfolio? And it's like, we have a lot of work, but I don't think you realize that most of our projects take 18 months. Like,
yeah,
a renovation from beginning to end could be more sometimes, or a new build. And so we have a lot of projects in the work, but nothing is photographed yet.
yeah,
And so it's like, you can't put it out there. I can put, things on stories and give you
yeah,
behind the scenes, but it's not going to be pretty and perfect. And
yeah,
so I think that expectation aspect is really important to help people understand. And the last thing I'll say is, sustainability, I think, is a big thing that's coming in terms of trying to be really aware. Like, everybody right now, all the big retailers are like, performance fabrics, everything's performance. And I was like, yeah, but a lot of the materials you're using are not like sustainable. They're not performance based. They're not long lasting. They're filled with lots of chemicals. And so I think it is really hard to find things in the market unless you have a lot of knowledge and you're spending a lot of hours digging to find like either those vendors that you really know how they're building their furniture, or what, fabrics you're using on your upholstered goods and things like that. So I think it's an interesting area that's evolving, but
mm,
it's hard. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it's a
And
big challenge now.
do you have, how are you seeing that from the client side? Like, have you seen, I suppose, clients being a little bit more educated or a bit more like, are they inquiring about that side of your design work and maybe like the furniture selections? Um, do you think that is coming into the client conversation a bit, like that whole sustainability angle?
It doesn't so much, honestly. I have to say, like, there are not that many clients that bring it up, but I think that the direction is going there.
Mm,
The biggest area where I really try to educate our clients in that is like, for example, we buy a sectional and the client was like, well, I want it cheaper. I'm like, okay, well, cheaper means you're going to wait longer for it because it's going to be made somewhere in Asia, and then it's getting on a boat and it takes X amount of weeks for it to sit on the boat and get to you, and then it gets in a truck and it has to drive to your house, and that part to me is not sustainable, right? And so what is it that you're paying for? And what is it that you're valuing? Is it time? Is it money? And so we do a lot of education with our clients. I tend to like to buy furniture that's made here in America because I know that it's not going that far. It's not taking forever. I know the quality is a little bit better, and I like to support American craftsmen. So I think it's, really depends on what it is. Like, we even have clients that are vegan and they're like, we can't have anything that's leather. And I'm like, okay, that's great. That's totally fine. But, we also have to think about, if you're vegan, like, what are other things that, in terms of the fabrics we're picking that are cruelty free or things like that. So it's sort of there's a lot of nuances in that.
Yeah. I find that really interesting. Like, I know, I mean, obviously down here in Australia, things come a long way to get to us. So I know that there's a lot of designers that are that kind of, the shipping part of it seems to be almost the easiest part to explain to a client about, like, if it doesn't have to sit on a ship and go in a truck, like, we're, it's less impact on the earth. But yeah, I do wonder if that will come more and more into the conversation from clients around sustainability. And even there's a bit of a discussion around, do you have, like, so we have what we call a McMansion here. It's a massive house. It's got, like, everyone's got their own bathroom and everyone's got their own study and bedroom, and it's just, there's like 6 living rooms and for the 3 people that are living in the house. And there's a bit of a discussion around, well, do you actually need to build such a big house? Like, do you really need so much space? And the impacts of, like, the environmental impacts of building such a big house. And I do think that's going to be something that comes a lot more into the discussion with clients about, what do you actually need in your house, and why do you need 7 bathrooms and 6 living rooms? But yeah, I think that's a bit of a change in the discussion that's happening. But I don't know how receptive clients will be to it. I think so. I mean, I suppose it depends on the client. Some clients will be like, yep, no, I understand that. And there'll be other clients that'll be like, no, I want what Susan's got down the road, and she's got 7 bathrooms and 6 living rooms.
Yeah, I mean, I think every client is different. We haven't gotten to that phase of doing a McMansion. So it's, I think it's, again, the building materials, right, and things that go into designing a home, I think is still going through an evolution and most clients, like, are never going to educate themselves on that or really think about it that much. So you, as a designer, part of your job is to do that if that's something that's important to you, right? If it isn't, it is what it is. But there's, I mean, the cost of window, I see crazy things where, like, we go on jobs and, like, the contractors, like, throwing in ladder and materials in trash, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, well, it takes me more time to clean it than just buying a new one. And I was like, that is not the mindset of somebody that is being really thoughtful about like the waste that you're putting out. So I think construction is very wasteful. I think there are businesses that are trying to optimize that. And that's something that I'm really curious as we evolve as a business. Like, how do we do that? Can we even, develop our own construction team and be thoughtful about, like, the amount of waste that goes into construction and, access and all that. So I think that's one of, there's the pretty side, and then there's the actual, like, raw element that most people don't think about.
Yeah. And look, I suppose that comes back to, in a bit of a circle about what we were talking about with AI, in that these are all the things that a designer, an educated designer, an experienced designer brings to the client. Like, AI is never going to be able to do all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that the two are so kind of, they're linked in a way. It's kind of like AI is a tool that we can add to our tool belt and all that kind of stuff. But there's there's so much that a good designer can bring to a client that I don't think anyone should be threatened by AI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
Awesome. So I would love to know, how do you fill your creative cup? Where do you draw inspiration from, or who do you draw inspiration from?
I mean, there's so many amazing designers out there, and it's funny, like I'll see things on Pinterest and I'm like, oh, I like that. The whole room I love, but there's like that one little thing that inspires me in the space. So it might be like a color or a pattern or, a detail of a piece of furniture. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And it kind of, I spiral. I'm the type of person who like stays up until 1 o'clock in the morning because I also am like, I have an idea. And so um it's things all around. I mean, I live in New York and I grew up, between France and America. And so have spent a lot of time in Europe, and I just love the architecture and sort of timeless elements that just like never get old. So I always like to reference that. We're much more on the modern side. We're sort of like transitional modern with classical elements is how I would define our, branded look.
Yeah.
And I like to play with bold colors and patterns, but in a way that is a little more subdued.
Yeah.
So, I like to reference back to those things and look at, I went to Cranbrook Kingswood, which is a beautiful high school up in Michigan, that's, was designed by Saarinen, and you have Frank Lloyd Wright houses
Yeah.
all around the neighborhood. Like, so there's just a lot of those things that I've been surrounded my whole life that I like to always have in the back of my mind. And they designed with such, purpose and function. And that is a lot of what defines how I design spaces. Like I said in the beginning,
Mm.
I really think about the parameters and I think about functionality before I start even selecting furniture, because
Yeah.
there are millions of options right out
Yeah.
there. But if I'm saying like this room can only fit this size sofa or this size of a sideboard or, this rug, then it gives me the boundaries to know that I have lots of ideas, but I have to be really thoughtful. And so, yeah, it's just an array. I think we see things that we like from other people, and it's how you spin it to make it your own.
Yeah.
And, really is, yeah. So there's lots of things out there to find.
Yeah, so it's really like it's all around and it's every day, which is so true. Like I think, having your eyes open, it's everywhere. What are you looking forward to in the next 12 months in your business?
Yeah, so one of the big things we're looking forward to is, like I said, we've only been in business for 2 years, so we are really expanding our portfolio. We're doing a lot more renovation projects this year, which I'm really excited about. So we get to do a lot of these amazing projects that we'll get to show. So I'm excited about that. We're actually going to be getting some rendered, and we're doing illustrations to kind of give people a sense of what they'll look like, because like I said, we won't see them finished until summer of next year.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what we're trying to do, is really up that. And we are focusing a lot on fostering new partnerships. So whether it's working with great artisans, I actually was meeting today with somebody I went to middle school with, and she's an amazing illustrator.
Yeah, wow.
And I haven't seen her in 20 years. And I was like, oh my God, you're doing amazing work. So we started talking about doing like a mural collaboration and things.
Awesome.
So doing those kinds of things. And we want to start our own sort of furniture line. So we're kind of working on that. And then I would like to get a little bit more into like commercial work. So doing either like a hotel or a restaurant, I think is just really interesting, totally different than residential, but something we're definitely looking to kind of focus more on experience driven, spaces.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. That sounds like a very exciting and jam-packed 12 months. So.
Yes, indeed.
And how can our community reach out and find you?
Yeah, so they can learn more about Atelier Roux on our website and our services and sort of our design process. We're also on Instagram, obviously, at Atelier Roux Design, where they can see our behind the scenes, where we're sharing a lot more about our process and how we work with clients. And then we love to connect with others in the industry. I think it's so important that we work together and think through things. It's, a very big industry and we all have our own aesthetic and things. So it's always collaboration over competition, in my opinion.
Yes.
So I would love if anybody wants to reach out, they can DM us on Instagram.
Awesome. And we will put all of those details in the show notes for everyone. Thank you so much, Manon. That has been such an insightful conversation and I have learnt so much. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Beth, so much.
What a great conversation with Manon. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did chatting with her. A couple of things that I found really insightful in the conversation was how Manon talked about that onboarding experience and how it starts right from the very first inquiry from the client, and how they take the time to present their fee proposal in person or over Zoom. I know that this is something that Lauren Lee talks about a lot, and how that it's such a crucial part of the process, and how it can be daunting at first, and you've got to get over your own insecurities about talking about money, but how it can be the perfect way to close a client and get them across the line. You're able to answer those questions in person at the time, and it just is such a great way of presenting that information. So I think that was a really great point from Manon. The other one that I really thought was so helpful, and I've found it in my own business, and I'm sure many designers will know this as well, is that importance of being clear with the client around budget. So many clients, I know they'll start, I don't know what the budget is, I'm not sure. But the reality is that at some point they do have a budget. And if you know what the budget is, you are able to design within their budget, and overall it will be a much better experience for them and for you as well. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Manon, and I look forward to seeing you for our next Design Dialogue. Thank you for listening to this Design Dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next Design Dialogue.